Guys, I promise I'm going to stop talking about baked beans. But here's what happened. So I researched these videos and I put them out there, and overall the response is really positive. So thanks, guys, for everyone who watches and likes and comments. I really appreciate it. And then I read the comments and I see some of the same points being made, and I watch other YouTubers, some of whom I respect a lot, talking about what I say on their channel and basically responding to some of the points that I made. And they say things like, I don't understand compounding, and if you just apply compound interest, it all makes sense, and what I'm saying goes out the window. And they're saying if you follow what I'm saying, and if you don't follow 6.1, essentially that you're going to be worse off than if you follow 6.1. So listening to those responses always makes me pause to think and reconsider, because I want to make sure that I've got the right information. And that's a big part of why I did my last video, or the previous video, where I did the code review and a detailed walkthrough, because I wanted to make sure I had my information correct. I wanted to check and recheck, go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that I wasn't getting something really critical wrong, because I do want to get it right. I want to make sure the information I'm putting out there is correct. I don't want to be spreading wrong information, and I don't want to cause anyone to lose money. That's not why I'm here. So I'm not trying to destroy baked beans or any other contract or destroy communities. I don't get anything out of doing that. So what I see my job as being here on YouTube is to look at these contracts, try to cut through the lack of information, or where I see there's active misinformation, or where there's a lot of hype or marketing spin surrounding these contracts. And I get in there and try to figure out how these contracts work, and I tell you guys how they work, what they're actually doing with your investment, and I give you my opinion on what I see the risks and the best strategies being based on my research. And if I wanted to do this the easy way, I just do what all the other guys are doing and just say, hey guys, here's a great new contract called baked beans. All you need to do is rebake 6 times a week, or maybe you should rebake 13 times every 2 weeks, and the more you rebake, the better, as I've seen a lot of people say. And I could just sit back here and collect the referral rewards like a lot of other people are doing, because, guys, the way the baked beans contract is set up, every time you, as an investor, rebake, the guy who referred you gets paid 12.5%. So the more you rebake, the more they get paid. They don't get paid a referral bonus when you withdraw. So if you use my referral link, I also get paid when you rebake. I don't get paid when you withdraw. So understand what I'm doing here when I say that sometimes it makes sense to rebake less, goes against my own financial interests. So if I told you guys to rebake all the time, like some people do, I would make much more money, because that's how it works. That's how the referral payout works. But I'm not here to scam subscribers, or I'm not here to squeeze as much money out of you guys as I possibly can at your expense. What I'm trying to do here on YouTube is build a channel that provides useful information, useful, accurate, truthful, unbiased, all those things that I'm trying to put forward to you guys based on my research. So I'm not saying that everyone who tells you to rebake is just in it for that bonus and they're being disingenuous or they're lying to you. Not at all. There are lots of honest and sincere people on YouTube, and some YouTubers who I trust and I think are doing a great job. But I just want to call out and make you understand where the incentives lie when it comes to contracts like baked beans. People are financially incentivized to tell you to rebake. The more that you rebake, the more they get. So that is what it is. And when it comes to the best strategy for baked beans, I can definitely understand why people are confused, and genuinely confused. You've got eggs, you've got beans, miners, market eggs. Who knows what all those things are? The documentation doesn't explain it. The return rate changes all the time, but they don't tell you exactly how. They say you can't work out how much beans are worth, and they just tell you to trust in this 6.1 model. So unfortunately, there's just not a lot of good information out there that lets people make their own informed decisions. So a lot of people try to work it out for themselves, and they try to understand how the contract works, and they try to do it based on some incorrect assumptions. And a lot of the spreadsheet models that I've seen out there that a lot of these YouTubers base their calculations on are based on false assumptions about compound interest. They assume because you compound your beans more and in the long run you have more beans, then that's going to necessarily translate into more returns, higher returns in the future. That's how compound interest generally works. But that's not necessarily the case. It's sometimes the case in baked beans that's true, and sometimes it's not the case, right? So in my analysis, 6-1 is not always the best strategy if you want to optimize your returns. As I've said in my last couple of videos, if you understand the logic in the algorithm, it makes sense to eat more at certain times, and it makes sense to rebake more at certain times. And it's really difficult to explain like the nuances to people, and at what times it makes more sense to eat, what times it makes more sense to rebake more, and tell you guys what the best strategy is for your specific situation, because the numbers are always changing, and it depends a lot on when you got in, when you first bought, and it depends on how many new investments there are every day, how much more money comes onto the contract every day, and it depends on what everyone else is doing on the contract at the same time, how much people are rebaking versus eating. But if you get caught up thinking that just simply increasing your beans means increasing your returns, as a lot of other YouTubers do, and produce spreadsheets based on percentage returns and growth in the future, you're going to make all sorts of incorrect calculations. And those incorrect calculations are going to lead you to the conclusion that rebaking all the time means really high returns in the future and kind of increasing returns in the future. Yes, that is how compound interest works. If you compound your money in the bank, you're going to have more money in the future, right? But that's not how baked beans work. Baked beans doesn't give you returns simply based on how many beans you have. The value of those beans change over time. So if you want to understand how that works, I would suggest watching my last video, or the video before the last video, where I do a full code review and a full functional analysis. It's really long, but it's also very detailed. It's very technical. It kind of gets into those nuts and bolts of how it works. I'm not going to cover all that here, but if you're interested in really understanding it, I would suggest you go and watch that video. So I'm not saying that you should never rebake. That doesn't make sense either. Like, never rebaking, you're not going to grow your investment, and there are times when it makes sense to rebake, and there are times when it makes sense to eat. There are times when it makes sense to rebake more, and times when it makes sense to eat more. So it's just that the 6-1 doesn't result in ever increasing returns, as a lot of people claim it does. And it's not always the best strategy that you're going to want to optimize your return. In fact, from what I've seen trying to model this contract, it rarely is the best strategy. And sometimes it results in significantly lower returns. In some cases, from what I've seen, depending on how the figures balance out at the time, you could be making less than half or even a quarter of what you could be doing through other strategies. And that's what I really want to talk about. And that's why I'm putting the information out there, because I think if you do your own research and if you understand how these contracts work, you can get a much bigger return on your investment. But I'm not just going to make claims that I can't back up. I'm going to show you the numbers today, because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't wrong about the information that I've been putting out there. So I've listened to a lot of the feedback. I've gone through the contract again. I've gone through my numbers again. I built this spreadsheet model that I'll show you today for the baked beans contract. It's not based on kind of loose, incorrect assumptions about compound interests or a fixed value of beans, or just like this 8% compounding that people base their calculations off. So what I put into this spreadsheet is, as much as possible, it actually uses the same formulas and the same calculations in the contract code. So the spreadsheet's never going to be 100% accurate at simulating what a smart contract does. It's just not possible. A smart contract does everything in real time. It reacts to actual, transactions on the chain, and those value of those transactions can have knock-on effects. But it's probably as close as you're going to get in a spreadsheet, in kind of duplicating or replicating the way that the contract works. And I think the results from what I've seen in the spreadsheet back up a lot of what I've been saying. I think you can point to other strategies here that deliver better results under different situations than 6-1. And hopefully the information that I'll present here to you today will help you guys make an informed decision about your rebate strategy and choose a strategy that best suits you. So it's probably going to be a long video. I'm not sure how long it's going to be, but I'll break it into parts and I'll put timestamps on the video. Firstly, I'm going to walk you through the spreadsheet and explain what each part of it does and how it performs its calculations, so you can you can pick that up yourself and play with it and do whatever you like with it with a complete understanding of what it is. And then I'm going to explain the limitations of the spreadsheet, what it can and can't model, where not all the information is present, so you can't get 100% accuracy, but you can get somewhere close to at least modeling the behavior of the contract, if not kind of exactly the same number of transactions and exactly the same results in terms of the value of things like market eggs. Then once we've talked about that, I'll look at the implications of the data. So firstly, how the contract balance is likely to develop. So things like the impact of the community all rebaking and eating at the 6-1 ratio. What happens if everyone did that at a different ratio? Because a lot of the claims are, well, if everyone does 6-1, then it's going to last a long time, versus if everyone does, eats all the time, it's not going to last very long. So I'm going to try to challenge some of those assertions and show you in the data what is and isn't, I guess, backed up by the numbers. And then we'll have a look at some different rebaking and eating strategies and how they might affect the returns based on when you start investing, because that's a key factor in this calculation, is that the point at which you enter baked beans, because that's the point that you basically get your beans, and it's the value of the contract at that time, the contract balance versus the market eggs, and where it moves from that point are really instrumental in changing the effectiveness of your strategy. So I'll go into all of that in that analysis today. And finally, I'm just going to have a quick look at some frequently asked questions and some comments that some of you have left under my videos, both positive and negative, and respond to some of those in the video. I don't have time to respond to every comment, although I do try to get to the most interesting ones, or I think the most relevant ones. But I will respond to some of those in the video today. So I'm going to leave a link to the Google Sheets spreadsheet in the comments as well. So I encourage anyone who wants to grab a copy of this spreadsheet, and you can play around with the numbers. You can edit it. You can chuck whatever numbers you want in there, and see if it helps you basically work out what's going on with baked beans, and come up with your own plan for your rebake strategy. What you need to do with that spreadsheet is save a copy, which you can then edit it. If you try to edit it, it's not going to work. If you send out a request for edit permissions to me, I'm going to ignore it. Obviously, I can't give people edit permissions on the spreadsheet because it's a shared spreadsheet. It's not going to last very long if people start editing. So just save a copy and you can do what you want with it. And so if you watch this video, if you have a look at the spreadsheet model, and if you disagree with what I'm saying, if you find something in the numbers that's wrong, or something that I've missed that invalidates what I'm saying, then by all means, please let me know. I will change my opinion and I will correct myself if the facts that I put on the table are incorrect. As I've said, I want to give you guys accurate and useful information, and I believe the best way of doing that is to look at the contract code, to call out exactly what it's doing, and to put that on the table for you guys, and not to just repeat what other people are saying, or to give you spin or marketing, or tell you, to rebake more, that kind of thing. But if there's something that I've said that's factually incorrect and it's backed up by the numbers, then I'm happy to correct it and to say I'm wrong. Okay. So after all that, if you watch the video, if you look at the spreadsheet, if you don't want to believe me, if you think that 6-1 is the way to go, or if you think that what I'm saying is completely wrong, that's completely okay. I'm not here to tell people how to spend their money. I'm not here to tell you how to invest. I'm just providing my opinion. I'm providing my view based on the analysis. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't give financial advice, and I don't benefit from telling people that at sometimes it makes sense to rebake less. I get paid like every other person who has a referral link when people rebake more, and keep that in mind. So if you find this information useful, if you learn something, if it helps you make money, then I feel like I've done my job. All right. Okay, let's get started. Let's have a look at the spreadsheet. So up the top here, we have the input section of the spreadsheet. So this is where you can enter some variables that relate to the contract, and there are also some constants in there that you shouldn't change that are basically how the contract works. So the first two fields are called community rebake rate and community eat rate. And you can actually set those however you want. So at the moment, it's rebake 6 times and eat once, and that's obviously over 7 days. But if you want to do like a one-to-one, so rebake 1, eat 1, or whatever you want to do, the spreadsheet will calculate all of the numbers based on that strategy. And this is the strategy that the community follows. So basically, you can't model what every single person is going to do. Everyone makes their own decisions. They rebake when they feel like it. They eat when they feel like it. So the only way you can model is to make some assumptions, and you can make this assumption that everyone in the community rebakes 6 and eats 1, and the model will calculate that basically for everyone. So this daily deposit adjustment is a way to, account for the new deposits that go on the contract every day. So what I've done is put into this contract, you can see these fields down here, which I'll explain later, but the new deposits and the contract balance, I've actually taken from the actual contract. So I've exported these from the contract itself. So these are actually accurate, going back since the beginning of the contract, back to up to I think the 5th of April. This is actual data from the contract, and I've done that so we can actually get real data in here. But once you get beyond that date, you're free to obviously enter whatever numbers you think are going to happen in these at this time. But just for the sake of modeling, what it's doing is just taking the last number that has an actual value and applying this logic. So it's just decreasing it by 3% every day. And this number is changeable. And the reason being, if this is a Ponzi-based contract. So of course, if you're assuming that the number of daily deposits increases every day forever, then it's going to last forever. That's what happens. Any Ponzi scheme is going to last forever if every day more people are investing over the previous day. So I don't think that's a useful calculation. So if you take something like a very small decrease daily over time, then that might give you something resembling what might actually happen. So it's not going to be obviously 100% accurate, because you don't know what the future holds, and you're free to, I guess, put any figures that you want in here that seem reasonable to you. And we'll have a look at some of these different options. So minus 3% in here is just a starting point. We can look at what the impacts are if you play around this figure in this video as well. Now, the referral amount is something that is pure guesswork, which is why it's a variable in here. So what we know is the rate that the referrals pay, and it's 12.5% for every new investment and 12.5% for every rebake gets paid to the referrer What we don't know is what percentage of investments have a referrer at the other end who is collecting that 12%. So those might be people who've been referred by a friend or via a comment somewhere or via a YouTube channel. But they also may be people who have duplicated or who have a second wallet and have just referred themselves, and they're collecting extra rewards from that. I would say a lot of people are doing that because it's real easy to do, and why not eat while you're rebaking? It seems to make a lot of sense to me, and I'm sure a lot of people are doing that. So I've set that at just a 20% amount. You can play with that amount. I have no way of knowing what the actual amount is, but it's there just to basically reflect the increase in beans and eggs, and also the decrease in contract balance that comes with having referrals. All right. So those are the ones that you can change and that you can play around with at a contract level. Now I've got investment variables, because what this spreadsheet calculates, as well as just the overall contract performance, the contract balance, new investments, all the rest, is it allows you to assume that you have an investment. So the initial investment here is in Way, and that the default amount that's in there is exactly 1 BNB, which is 1 to the power of 18, with 18 zeros after it. That's how many Way are in a BNB. So initial investment goes in here, and the date that you invested goes in this field. So that if you invested on the very first day, it would be 11/7/2021. This is US format. Actually, I think it's 11/6. Yeah, that's right. 11/6/2021. That was the first day of the contract. So whatever day you invest, you put in here, and that's because if you invest here at the very beginning of the contract versus if you invest here versus if you invest here, you're going to have really different outcomes, and you're going to have really different optimal values for baseline. For your investment strategy. All right. And so you can test different numbers in there. You can put your own numbers in there and try to see if it reflects what your actual strategy is. Okay, and then you've got your rebake rate and your eat rate. So when the numbers up here at the top, this is what the community is doing, and here is what you're doing. So if you want to change what you're doing, it's exactly the same, and you can show your returns down here. And basically when you tweak this, you can see if your returns are going up or down. And it's okay to have zeros in this. There's no divide by zero here. If you want to rebake every day and never eat, well, your returns are going to be zero, obviously. Or if you want to rebake 29 days out of 30 and eat 1, then your returns are going to look like this based on everything else. So you're free to put whatever you want in here. It doesn't have to be for a 7-day period or anything. It's really flexible in that way. All right. And then we get to the constants. These are the things on the contract that don't change. We get a 3% dev fee, which is paid to the owner on bake. That's when you buy, and on eat. You got a referral bonus of 12.5% that is paid in eggs whenever you bake. That is buy or rebake. You have a base number of eggs that are generated by the algorithm every 24 hours. And you can see that base number is just equal to the number of seconds in a 24-hour period. 60 times 60 times 24 is 86,400. And that amount is used in calculations. We have the eggs to beans conversion ratio of 1 to 1.080 million. That is the number that's coded into the contract. And basically, whenever you rebake your eggs and you turn them into beans, the number of eggs you have is divided by this number to tell you how many eggs that you're getting out of that rebake transaction. And that number is coded into this spreadsheet. We have the starting market eggs. That is the value of the market eggs variable at the opening of the contract. That is coded into the spreadsheet. And we have the way to BNB conversion, which is just in here for reference. You'll notice that number is the same as this one. That is the number of way in a BNB, and that's useful in these calculations, or you can use this if you're trying to convert between way and BNB easily. That's that number here. And the last two constants that we have here is the market eggs bake or rebake increase. What this means is that whenever you bake or rebake, the value of market eggs increases by 20% of the amount of eggs that you just baked or rebaked. So when you buy into baked beans or when you rebake, you're increasing the amount of market eggs by 20% of the eggs that you just baked in that transaction. If this doesn't make any sense to you, I would again suggest watching the previous video where I go into a lot of detail around this. And market eggs increase whenever you eat your beans. You increase, in addition to getting your returns, you increase market eggs as a percentage of the eggs eaten, and that percentage is 100% when you eat eggs. So basically, when you rebake and bake, you increase the market eggs by 20% of the amount of eggs that you just rebaked or baked. When you eat, you increase it by 100% of what you just ate. So those calculations are also in this spreadsheet based on these numbers, which are in the contract code and I've spoken about in my detailed contract analysis. And finally, we've got the strategy results. And this is a good way of just seeing, once you've put in the data of that reflects how you think that the contract is going to play out, based on kind of the number of new deposits, based on what you see all these variables being, based on how you see your own rebake rate being. You can basically play with these to your heart's content and work out what is likely to be a best strategy for you. So look, I'm going to make this very clear. This is not going to be 100% model. This is not going to be 100% accurate. There's no way this can be 100% accurate. When the contract runs, it runs in real time. And really what happens is that each transaction that happens on the contract executes in real time. It changes the value of the contract balance and of market eggs in real time. And that has a flow-on effect onto the next transaction that happens. So all of this stuff has like these cumulative effects that you really cannot model unless you are duplicating the contract for every single transaction, and the information just isn't there to do that. So this is an approximation. The calculations do this on a daily basis, like a batch basis. So it's about as close as you can get without trying to recreate every single transaction that sits on the block. So I wouldn't take this number as meaning this is exactly the returns you're going to get. And I wouldn't take this number as being like, this is, if you sit there and tweak and you find out that your best strategy is 5 to 4, it may not be. This is supposed to indicate that there is a difference between these strategies and what that difference might be. Okay. So just to explain these strategy results in more detail. So strategy return is what your returns are estimated if you follow the strategy that is that you've put here under the variables. This baseline return is just the returns if you're eating every day. So I've just got in the spreadsheet a part that works out, well, what if I'm just eating every day? How much am I going to get? And then you can compare that to work out if you're better off baking more or eating more, just as a baseline. So usually the strategy that you come up that involves rebaking at least sometimes, usually that's going to be a better strategy. How often the rebake is, will depend on how much better that strategy is. But when I've been playing with these numbers, sometimes the baseline strategy, that's eating every day, sometimes that's actually the best strategy. Sometimes, depending on where you come in, depending on what the contract balance looks like, sometimes that might actually be the best way to go based on these numbers. So look, if you are using these to try and work out what the best approach is, again, it's not going to be 100% accurate. So I really warn you about that. It's just an indication to demonstrate this point that return is variable. In the video I posted about 24 hours, just a little over 24 hours ago, I did go through to show a way that you can basically make sure that that when you're not rebaking, that you're not devaluing your beans too much. And you could get a kind of equilibrium strategy there of trying to eat when your returns are above a certain point and then rebake when they're below a certain point. I still recommend that if you're trying any kind of weird strategy, that you use that to monitor how much the value of your beans is changing day to day, because you really can't predict the future. And this model makes a lot of assumptions about what the future is, and obviously you can never get 100% of the way there. So this is all a massive caveat to say I wouldn't rely on this as your investment strategy, but I think it's a good tool to at least understand how baked beans does returns, and how those returns are affected not only by your baking strategy, but all the other factors, contract balance and market eggs being the primary ones. All right, so that's this top section explained. Now, all of the calculations happen basically down here, and you can see the first column is the date column, and I'm not going to scroll down all the way, but I'll control down here, just take you to the end of the spreadsheet. There's 2,300 lines of basically calculation in here, and this takes you to what is that? February 2028. And I wanted to go that far in the future, just so there's no accusations of, but you're going to get the money back like years in the future, or there's a long payback period that you need to account for, or there's some residual income effect that I need to account for. This is a very long time period, and if you have a look at the contract balance and the returns columns really far down that date column, you'll notice the returns really diminish into nothing. They pretty quickly hit a level that is on par with essentially the transaction fee that would be pulling that investment out. So, the last 5 years or so are probably not going to be of much use, but they're just in here for completeness. And if you want to, play with the formula and the dates, you can do that without copy and pasting new lines. Okay, now we have new deposits in way, and this is taken from the contract balance, as I've said, with a couple of caveats. It is rounded. You can see those numbers are very round numbers. I did round those, so they're approximate values. They're not exact values. And for the days where there was zero investment, there were a few days, especially early on, with zero amounts. I've just put one there. One weighs a tiny amount of money, but I did that just so I didn't have to add extra logic to avoid divide by zero errors in the spreadsheet. But this is pretty much what was on the contract up to a certain date. And as I said earlier, beyond that, it basically just applies that percentage that is in the variables, which you can change. You can make that go up, you can make that go down, or if you want, you can just, you can type whatever numbers you want in here. You're not going to break the spreadsheet by doing that. All right, the next column takes the total amount invested in Way. Once again, Way is the smallest subdivision of A, B, and B. So the total amount invested, and you can see that's cumulative. So on the first day, it's equal to the deposits, and then it just adds the previous days or that day's deposits and gives a cumulative total. And you can see this on the graph. So this graph represents the contract performance. You can see new deposits. They're very low here. They're very hard to see just because of all the numbers that are so big, but that blue line is new deposits. That total invested in Way is the red line. The contract balance here is the orange line. And look, the reason why I separate that out, you need to know the total invested versus the contract balance, because those two are always diverging. Some people get those two confused. The contract balance is not the total invested. It's how much is left on the contract after paying people. So highlighting that contract balance there. And the last couple of lines here are the total number of beans, which actually doesn't show up on the graph because it's such a relatively low number compared to these other numbers. And then you can see this big purple line is market eggs, and that market eggs variable, which basically tries to compensate for both basically for the large number of rebakes and the inflation in eggs by going up and normalizing the returns you get. So we'll look at the impacts of that in the model as well, but that's what's shown in this graph. So the next column is the dev fees on bake. So when you deposit, dev makes a cut of that. So those fees are listed here, and they come out of the contract balance. There's also dev fees when you eat, and they also come out of the contract balance. So they're just listed here in the contract per day. You might notice that there's no dev fees for the first 2 days. Well, for the first day, that makes sense on the eat because no one is eating on the first day that they rebake, according to 6.1. And on the second day, no one is eating really just to make the spreadsheet work, because if we had people eating on that day, or the calculation hitting the bottom line that day, you get a circular reference. So basically the eat value for the dev fee comes out the day after the eats actually happen in the spreadsheet. This is really, technical, but it's just to keep the spreadsheet working and avoid a circular reference. But the numbers equalize, and the numbers are not really impacted very much at all by that change. So we have a contract balance here, and as you can see up here, the numbers are basically taken from the actual contract balance as it was on each of these days, rounded to the nearest whatever denomination that is. And then beyond that, it is calculated. So beyond that, it is just calculated based on whatever yesterday's contract balance was, minus what was paid out in EATs, also minus any fees and things like that. So you can check the logic of that. Basically just maintains a running total of the contract balance in that column. Right, so the next column is the total beans. And the reason why I calculate total beans, now the contract itself doesn't have any concept of the total number of beans that are in circulation at any one moment. And the reason for that is that it doesn't actually do any calculations based on total beans. It does a calculation for each individual contract, each individual address on the contract, and works out how many beans it holds, and it does a calculation on payout or on rebake based on how many beans that address holds. But seeing as I'm trying to do that calculation or approximate that calculation for every address on the contract at the same time, I need to keep a running total of how many beans there are. And how do I know how many beans there are? Well, we have a beans buy formula in the contract, and a beans sell formula in the contract, and a beans rebake formula essentially in the contract. So every day we work out how many beans were purchased based on the new deposits that came in that day, and what the approximate beans buy ratio calculation was on that day, and we increase the number of beans by that amount. We also work out how much was rebaked each day, and we increase the beans by that much as well. And we also calculate how much was added in referrals, and we add that amount in beans, because obviously the referrals also go through to the referral wallet owner, and they are calculated and turned either into beans or rewards, so they need to be accounted for as well. So that's what that total beans is, and it just keeps a running total of the total number of beans in the contract per day. As I said, this is never going to be exactly accurate given the complexity of these calculations and what this model is trying to do. It's trying to give an indication. It's trying to give a rough approximation of how the contract works. So there's no point going to a line and saying, oh, well, that's not right because I had X number of beans on this day. It's never going to be correct, because there are so many factors that go into this calculation that any small amount can skew it. But I think the overall big picture of how it works is fairly consistent regardless of those exact numbers. And if you don't think those numbers are correct, put some numbers of your own in and see how that affects things. Okay. Now, market eggs. Let's scroll over to one more. Market eggs is very wide because that number becomes so huge as we go along. Now, market eggs starts at this number, 108 billion. That's the number it starts at contract initiation, and it goes up from there. It never goes down. It keeps going up, and the calculations that make it keep going up happen whenever someone buys, whenever someone rebakes, whenever someone sells. So the next columns along do those calculations. So column I here, we see the total number of eggs baked, and that is based on, if you follow this formula, you can check all of these formulas. Please, I encourage anyone to check these formulas who wants to. So based on the number of number of beans that exist at on that date, this is the bake adjustments, and scrolling around, bake means buy. So the total number of eggs that were derived from new investments on that date per the calculation of the current market rate of eggs at that time are then converted to beans, because that's what happens when
you buy, your beans are your eggs are rebaked immediately into beans, and those beans go and get added to the beans total, and the eggs that were used to generate those beans get added to the market eggs at that total that we saw up the front top in the corner, which is 100%. So 100% of the eggs get added to that market eggs total here for the next day. Right? So that's how this works. The rebake adjustments need to happen as well. So on the first day, we've got no rebakes. That's just a 0. And then beyond the first day, there's a calculation to work out how many eggs are getting rebaked. And how does that calculation work? Well, we take the total number of beans that are in existence on that day. We work out how many eggs were generated in a 24-hour period. We multiply those two numbers together, which is what the algorithm does. And then to account for the rebake to eat ratio, in this case 6:1, we then apply that rebake to eat ratio here. So B2 references what would be the 6, and B2 plus B3 represents what would be the 6 plus 1, so that would be 6/7. So you're taking 6/7 of the total amount that would be rebaked, of eggs on a daily basis. And because you're doing 6/1, you're essentially rebaking 6/7 of them, and you are eating 1/7 of them. So that's how that ratio is managed in this spreadsheet. So we work out how many eggs are being rebaked. We work out, similar to the previous column, those rebaked eggs getting converted to beans. And then we add the corresponding amount of 20% of the total egg value, not the bean value, the egg value, to market eggs. Okay, and the same thing for eating. We do 1/7 of the total being eaten every day according to that 6/1, and if you change that ratio, it also changes the payout structure here. It adds the corresponding amount of eggs to market eggs, and then it calculates the weigh value of those eggs that are eaten, and that's according to the same calculation that the contract uses. So it's following the same logic as the contract is. Of course, again, it's not going to be exact because the value of market eggs at any one time is approximated here. It's estimated. The contract balance is going to be slightly different at the time that each transaction is done. So it's always going to be approximate. It's never going to be exact, and sometimes that can throw out the figures by a fair amount. But this is as close as you're going to get to a model. This is doing exactly what the contract is doing, just in a simplified way. All right. So the next few columns, we've got referral bake adjustments, and what this does is add or calculate how many eggs that also get added due to referrals. And this is that 12.5% referral on rebake and bake. So that's why I've got a bake adjustment and we've got a rebake adjustment. So whenever someone bakes or rebakes, a portion of their eggs, 12.5%, go to the referrer, and the percentage of the total eggs for that day is dictated by that percentage up the top, which you can change. On the spreadsheet at the moment, it's set to 20%, but you can change that to whatever you want. But basically, you can see that the referral eggs and the referral rebakes also get added to market eggs. So I wanted to make sure that was captured somewhere here, that there was some way to capture basically that figure going on market eggs. All right, so the same thing happens here to the referral. Sorry for clicking around. It's difficult to navigate sometimes. The referral bake adjustment, that just adds on to market eggs. And this next section is relative indicators, and I've just put this in here as an easy reference, just so you can see how things change. So this is just the relative beans for an equal amount of B and B. So when you buy, the daily rate of beans fluctuates based on the value of market eggs at the time, based on the contract balance at the time. And you can kind of see that fluctuation for an arbitrary amount of beans here. It kind of goes up and then it keeps going up. And then at some points, depending on the contract balance, it might also go down. There's a lot of inflation on beans here. And you can see that inflation just keeps going up. And the reason is this is the method that the algorithm uses to essentially try to equalize for later investors. And it's pretty clever the way it does it. It essentially applies this inflation level to beans. So if you invest the same amount later, you're going to get a lot more beans than if you invest early. That doesn't mean you're going to get the same returns. It's only equalizing one half of the equation. But it is a measure that is made to, I guess, when you're talking about an ROI app or a Ponzi-based app, usually it's first in makes the most money. Still the case here, definitely, but it tries to equalize and not punish late entries as much as other contracts do. All right, so that's the relative beans on buy. The relative returns for an equal amount of beans. Again, we've got an arbitrary amount of beans and we're selling them. How much do you get when you sell them? Well, you can see this starts off high and it kind of goes low. And just because of the initial variation in the contract, there's a high amount of change in the contract balance versus the market eggs that kind of go down and then goes up and then it goes down. And that's why eventually it will, your relative returns for equal beans, meaning the value of your beans does go down in the long term, and eventually it decreases over really long periods until it's basically zero. And at this point it's essentially zero. So this is where the logic comes from that you need to rebake, because obviously your beans over time do get devalued. But as I've said in my videos before, there are times when, particularly when the contract balance is rising quickly in relation to the market eggs variable, when that's not actually true. When your beans are increasing in value for short periods of time. So you can see that reflected in this variable here. That can happen. And that's why I've said it makes sense at certain times to sell more or to eat more rather than rebake, because otherwise you're rebaking to increase your beans in order to claim them at a time when they're worth less, when you could be claiming them at a time when they're worth more. And this is really might be very difficult to understand because this is a very kind of convoluted contract, but it's borne out in the numbers. And I show you this just to show you in numbers what I'm reflecting here. You can see this is all calculations from the formula. I'm not putting numbers in here to prove a point. This is the formula. This is the same formula that the contract uses. All right. So from relative indicators, we look at the strategy results. So these next two sections, strategy results and baseline results, they are what do the calculations for the strategies that the person is going to employ. So you or whoever is using the spreadsheet. So basically, the current beans on the day of investing, that's when you buy, on the day that you buy, that's how many beans that you'll get for that amount that you invest. That's all the subsequent calculations. So the daily eggs, and you can see the beans going up because you're following the 6-to-1 strategy or whatever it is that you've put in there. You can see the daily returns being calculated similar to the other parts of the spreadsheet. And you can see the cumulative returns there. That's the total returns over time. And then we've got the baseline results here. And this is what happens if you never rebake. And again, I put this in here as a baseline. You can see current beans never goes up. Whatever you get on day one is going to be like that forever. And you can see the day one is the same as for the strategy. So under this strategy, you're following 6-to-1 or whatever you want to put in there. Under here, you're just eating every day and you're seeing what happens, right? So you can see the daily eggs is always going to be the same because your beans never change. And your daily returns will fluctuate based on the daily value of the beans. And you can see that sometimes goes up and sometimes it goes down. And in the long term, it always goes down and it always approaches zero. Okay. And then you can look at the cumulative returns at any point in time, compare between the two options and see which one is working out better. And what this spreadsheet does as well, if you want to change the date that you invested, say instead of the 6th of November, you invest on, say, Christmas Day in US format, 12/25/2021, the spreadsheet logically does that calculation. So obviously you're getting no returns up until that date, and that's the point it starts calculating from. So it adjusts the buy value of your eggs, and it adjusts all the sell values based on what they would be at that point in the contract. So that's basically it. That's what this contract is doing. It's trying to calculate the actual values in the contract based on how the contract works. So it's not just taking compound interest. It's not making assumptions about the value of beans. It's doing all of these difficult calculations when you buy, when you rebake, when you eat. It's trying to keep track of the market eggs variables, trying to keep track of the total beans, and it's trying to do all the calculations that the contract is doing. And I'm going to go to great pains to say this is not going to be exactly what's on the contract. It is a approximation. It is a model for the contract. It is trying to model what the contract is doing so we can see what we can learn from that behavior. It's not meant to be like I just put in today's date and work it out and this is going to tell me what my ideal strategy is. That's never going to work, because the way the contract works is it calculates everything in real time. It's never going to match this ideal or simplified format, but it is as close as you can get modeling on a daily basis and not trying to replicate every transaction on chain individually. So I hope that makes sense. I really apologize for repeating myself there, but I don't want people picking up this spreadsheet, plugging in the dates, putting in their own numbers, and then using this to try and work out how much they're going to make. That's not going to work. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do now is, now that I've explained the spreadsheet, now that you understand how it works, I'm going to just tweak a few numbers here and just show you what the impact is on the overall contract performance, and really to make a few points, I think more than anything. Now, the first one I want to look at is, I guess, the community rebake and eat ratio rate, because a lot is said around this. A lot is said, well, hey, if everyone follows 6.1, the contract is going to last a very long time, and if everyone just does this, it's going to keep paying out in the long term, and that's the thing that matters. Or even a higher number, that does matter. Like if you put the numbers in, you'll see a change in the contract, but it's not going to matter as much as you think. So you just take a note here where the approximate peak here is at the beginning of May on this particular model. Again, this is not a prediction that's going to change at the beginning of May. This is completely not what this does, but you can see where that peak is, and you can see that relative decline down towards the end of the year. If I change this to, I don't know, 20, you can see that peak is not changing by much, right? The decline is slower, but what's really changed is, in fact, this market eggs variable has shot through the roof. And I'll just undo that just so you can see the comparison again. You can see that market eggs variables come right down, that numbers come right down. And this is an interesting thing that I found, because I thought that I'd assumed that the market eggs variable would grow faster when there were more people selling, right, or eating, I should say, rather than when they're rebaking. But it actually grows at a much faster rate when you rebake more. And you can just demonstrate that by bringing that number down. So bring that down to 1, and you can see that market eggs variable doesn't increase at all that much, right? And you can also see that curve that we get, which is really similar to the same curve we saw for BNB Miner and the eggs game, that doesn't change all that much based on the community eating 6-1. That's just baked into the contract, so to speak. But the interesting thing about market eggs is that when you rebake more, you actually increase market eggs more than when you eat, which is counterintuitive, because the market eggs eat increase is 100%, but the rebake increase is only 20%. So why is that? Well, it's because of compound interest. So it's because you're compounding the value of that market eggs through the rebake. You're increasing the number of eggs. You're increasing the number of beans when you rebake. So you're increasing that multiplier. So beans is a multiplier of market eggs, and by increasing the number of beans, you're increasing the number of market eggs on the next rebake. So that is that compound interest at play, the compounding effect at play on market eggs. And what's interesting about that is that is what counteracts the compounding effect on beans when you compound. So you compound beans and you get more and more beans, but the beans are worth less and less. And why? It's partially because that market eggs is going up at a faster rate because you are compounding. So market eggs is actually the mechanism built into the contract code that keeps that stabilizes the payouts. So it actually prevents compound interest from kicking in beans. It prevents your beans being a full 8% daily compounding. Even if you're compounding every day, even if you're baking your beans every day, you're getting more and more beans. But the more people are doing that, the higher this number goes, because it has to equalize that compounding. It doesn't make sense that everyone is compounding 6-to-1 and everyone is making a lot of money, because there wouldn't be enough money in the contract to pay them. So how does the contract account for that? Well, it just ramps up that number to reduce the payouts. So you need to keep that in mind. That is why compounding or rebaking does not necessarily compound your returns. So really important to understand that. And I think a lot of YouTubers who are saying, taking the simplistic view of what I'm saying, don't understand that. They think that when you compound your beans are worth the same or maybe just a bit less. But you look at that line and you understand what that means when the community rebakes. Because bottom line, what the contract is doing is making sure through these checks and balances is making sure that line pretty much stays the same. That's why we've seen a very similar curve for BNB Miner and the egg game. And it's not because at this point people stopped following 6-to-1. It's because that's what the contract does. The contract enforces this kind of curve by adjusting the market eggs ratio to keep the compounding from resulting in higher returns, because the contract cannot pay for higher returns. It cannot give everyone, 10x their initial investment if they compound. It just does that doesn't logically make sense for a Ponzi based contract that is paying out of a fixed balance that everyone has paid into. Okay, so you can play around with this number and see really that the 6-to-1 ratio that the community claims is going to result in a longevity for this contract. It doesn't really make much of a difference. What makes all the difference, just as with any Ponzi scheme, some people object to my use of the word Ponzi scheme. Let's just call it a Ponzi-based contract. Like with any Ponzi-based contract, what matters is how much money is going into the contract. So if we're following this -3 per day, that's basically what it was. The same new investment as was yesterday, but just 3% less. This is what the curve looks like. If you think that you're going to get a flat investment every day, then sure, the baked beans is going to last a very long time. If you think that the same number of people are going to invest in baked beans from now until 2030, or or maybe that number is increasing, absolutely. If baked beans manages to generate infinite investment, it will last forever. That almost goes without saying. It's like a logical statement. Yes, if with infinite investment comes infinite returns. And some people make the argument that people will just keep investing. If you believe that people will keep investing and this thing will just keep going forever, then of course, you're just going to keep getting returns forever. Does that mean that the value of your returns in the future is, if your beans in the future is going to keep going up? Not necessarily. It depends on a lot of factors like the rate of investment. But yeah, it could be sustainable indefinitely. But that's, in my opinion, that's not a very good way to make an investment, is to assume that it's going to just keep building and people are going to keep putting money into it. That's not a reasonable assumption in my view. So look, if you take this kind of rough -3%, or you can make it -5%, and you can see that actually does have an impact on the curve. So -5% or -10%. So make that 10%, -10%. You can see that has a sharp impact. It brings the end date forward significantly. It decreases the curve, but not even that much. Like, you still get roughly the same shape in that curve, and you can put whatever numbers in here you want. This is why I'm showing the spreadsheet. You can model this. You can
predict exactly what's going to happen every day for the next 20 years if you want, and put it in this spreadsheet and get whatever curve you want, but with a reasonable assumption. Say like, the you're going to get, at least in the short term, kind of a slightly diminishing daily return, but still pretty consistent returns. You're going to end up with a curve very similar to what we've seen on BNB Miner and Egg Game. Okay, so now we've looked at how the rebake and eat rate that the community holds has an impact or doesn't have an impact on the overall outcome of the project, and we've also looked at basically how the investment amount has an impact on the sustainability of the project, as you would expect. Now, I wanted to have a look at these strategy results because I think it's what a lot of people are interested in. What's the best strategy here? Is it rebaking 6 times and then eating, or is it eating every day? Well, it depends on when you first invest. So let's change this back to the date it was at first. So that's the first date the contract balance started, right? So we'll take the assumption that the community is baking at the 6-to-1 ratio for the overall calculations, and for our calculation, we're also going to bake at 6-to-1. So if we're baking at 6-to-1 under this model, we're going to end up with this amount of returns. I'm not going to try and pronounce that number. And if we were just eating every day since the contract beginning, we end up with a much lower number. So that's absolutely true. And I'll tell you why, the reason for this, and it's completely consistent with what I've been saying. The reason is, during this period of low contract balance, but with a steadily increasing market eggs, absolutely the right strategy is to rebake in order to keep up with the market eggs, assuming everyone else is rebaking, because the contract balance doesn't have a major impact on payout. What has a major impact is market eggs. So you want to increase during that period of time, otherwise you're going to get left behind. So that completely makes sense. What I've been saying is to rebake less when the contract balance is on a sharp increase as it has been lately. And that is also borne out by the numbers. So we'll look at those numbers next. But first of all, even for this strategy, you can play around with the numbers. And is 6-to-1 the best strategy? Well, let's go 5-to-1. That number went up. So 5-to-1 is actually, or could be under this model, a better strategy. 4-to-1, 3-to-1. These are better strategies. 2-to-1. That's resulting in increases, right? So 1-to-1 is not so good, and 0-to-1 is not so good. But 2-to-1 compared to 6-to-1, that's basically almost double your money in terms of your returns. And that's a significant return if you got in on day one. So, definitely, again, this is just reinforces. I'm not saying you should never rebake. It makes sense to rebake sometimes, makes sense not to rebake sometimes. You should understand where in the contract it makes sense to rebake, where in the contract it doesn't make sense to rebake. And this model, I think, helps at least understand that. But to say that 6-to-1 is always the best, not necessarily. Okay. And that calculation changes depending on when you come in. So if you don't come in at the start when there's a flat balance for many months, say you come in after the contract actually starts rising pretty sharply. So let's say on the first of the third, getting thrown off by American time again. So it's 3-1 2022. Okay. So now we're actually coming in at a point where the contract balance is increasing. And I'm still following 6-to-1. And what's the outcome? Well, exactly as I've been saying, your baseline return, if you're eating every day, that's actually a more effective strategy than if you are compounding 6-to-1. Because, again, the contract balance is going up. That means that the relative buying power of your eggs is going up, and you're getting increased returns just due to the contract balance. And if you're rebaking at this time, what you're essentially doing is deferring those returns to a later time when the contract balance is lower. And that logic is borne out by these numbers. Okay. So that's not to say that eating every day is the best strategy. It's simply under this specific conditions, it is a better strategy than 6-to-1. But if you went 5-to-1, that's pretty good. That's still not as good as eating every day there. Let's go 3-to-1. Well, that's better. 2-to-1, that's even better. 1-to-1, even better. So
So you can tweak. So look, there you go. Between 1 to 1, the return is 735. If you're doing 6 to 1, it's less than half, or basically exactly half. So that's a massive amount of difference. And people who are saying 6 to 1 is always the best strategy, you're going to maximize your returns, it's the best way to go. It's just not, it's not true. Like, it doesn't make sense for that to be true. Okay. And look, you can tweak these numbers how you want. 6 to 1, maybe you want to make that 6 to 2, or 3 to 2. This is, highly changeable, but you can see basically at points where the contract is going up, it makes sense to eat more, because you're not you're going to get lower returns in the future. It's kind of at this point, it's pretty self-explanatory to me. It's borne out by the numbers. If anyone thinks that I'm at this point, I'm just making this up, or that I'm somehow incentivized to spread misinformation. I'm not. This is what the contract does. This is what the numbers show. Basically, make your own investment decision, follow your own strategy. But it is what it is. Yeah. So look, I'm not going to go into too much here. The spreadsheet is available. You can play with it yourself if you want to go like beginning of May. I'm sure you'll see from this, if you take a rebate, kind of the later that you go in this contract curve, the more eating every more often helps, right? So here we are at the beginning of May, sometime in the future. Again, not an accurate model, it's not going to happen like this. This is a approximation, but at this point, your baseline return, if you're eating every day, 483. Your strategy return, if you're following 6-1, is going to be 189. That's substantially less than half. If you did 1 to 1, it might be all right, but it seems like, maybe you want to go the other way and do like 6, 7, 8. It may not even be worthwhile doing anything apart from just eating every day at a certain point in the contract. And this is pretty much at or around the peak. If you hit the peak, or if you hit kind of before the peak, and you're following 6-1, you may not even make your investment back in some cases. So this is why this is important. If you don't want to be the guy who just, who's a sucker and loses your money because you're following some bad advice, then, maybe come up with your own strategy that suits you. And once again, if you watch the video I posted yesterday, you can look at the contract and you can see how the buying power of your beans is holding up. And if it's going up, you can try and to cash out and eat. If it's going down, you can try and rebake. That is a way you can try and basically balance or equalize your payments, and it may or may not be the most optimal. It's really difficult to work out the optimal strategy, but at least make sure that you're getting a good chunk of returns back early. You're making your investment back, and you're following something close to an optimal strategy, because the people, once again, the people who say just keep rebaking, it's compound interest, they just don't understand, or they don't want to understand the fact that these future returns are not necessarily related to the number of eggs you have. You can compound your eggs till they reach infinity, but that doesn't mean that your returns are going to increase. Okay, so this is really important to understand. So look, that's about all I think I'll go through on this model. Feel free to get the spreadsheet, download it, do what you want with it. If you find anything in there that is incorrect, please point it out and I'll fix it. If it's a major issue, I'll comment. I'll make a correction if I've gotten something fundamentally wrong. I would 100% expect there might be some some minor errors in a spreadsheet of this size with many tens of and thousands of cells in it. But I've done my best to at least sanity check that these calculations are correct. And, the outcomes are just in line with what logically follows from what's in the code. So I'm pretty confident that this is at least roughly reflective of what happens on the contract. Okay, so we've looked at the spreadsheet, we've looked at how it works, we've looked at the different
ways that the rebake and the EAT strategies can affect the contract shape or the contract balance and the contract longevity. We have looked at your different investment strategies and how 6-1 is not always the best strategy. Sometimes, eating a little bit more it results in higher returns. Sometimes just eating every day offers the best returns. It really depends all on your entry point. So we've gone through that. You can have the spreadsheet and play around with it yourself. As the last part of this video, I wanted to do a little bit of a Q&A, sorry, not Q&A, a FAQ, to cover some comments that I get very often and that I see on my channel or covered in other people's content, and respond to some of those points. Some of them I do just to kind of clear myself and to essentially just to respond to criticism, and others I think asked some very good questions that I wanted to share the answers as I see them with you guys. Right, so these first two comments are in relation to the advice that I'm giving causing people's contract balance, daily returns to fall really quickly to 1%. And this is a misconception in my view, especially at times like now when the contract balance is increasing. I've explained all of that in this video and in past videos. There are times when the contract balance is flat that, yes, if you're not rebaking constantly, you're going to fall behind. That is absolutely true of some-times and not of others. But I think a lot of people just take this as fact and repeat it. They think that if you're not rebaking all the time, your daily returns are going to drop from 8% to 1% or 0.5% or nothing, like within a matter of days or weeks. It just doesn't happen that way, especially at this point in the contract, when the contract balance is increasing. So I think I watched that. I used the contract to try and track what was happening over the course of a couple of days, and it dropped by I think a few thousandths of a few thousand decimal points per day, 1,000 to 3 decimal points of the value per day. So really small amounts. Eating constantly through this period, there's not really much of a penalty. There is a penalty. The value of your beans, also the number of your beans doesn't go up. The value of your beans goes slightly down, but not much. And it makes sense to get gains while the gains are good, rather than accumulate beans for a time when the gains are likely to be less. So, the same thing. I'm not worried about my returns shrinking to zero because I understand how the contract works, and I can also check what my returns are going to be and what the value of my beans are every day. And if I do get concerned, I can start baking more. So that's basically it on that one. And the next one refers to anti-whale questions. So I've talked about this in my code analysis, and I basically said there's no anti-whale mechanism, and I stand by that. There's no function that specifically punishes people with a lot of money from pulling out that money. It's the same mechanism that punishes everyone. So the second comment is saying, well, that kind of is an anti-whale, because if you have a ton of money in there and you start taking that out, then all the rates are going to go down, and the market eggs is going to go up, and that's how you get punished. Well, that's not really a punishment. That punishes everyone. So that's a really strange anti-whale mechanism when if a whale takes out a large amount of funds, it punishes everyone. That's not really an anti-whale mechanism. So it's complicated. Like, there is whatever mechanism there is applies to everyone. There's no specific anti-whale mechanism that prevents people from taking big sums out or does any kind of calculation based on volume. It's all just the same market eggs versus contract balance calculations. All right, so these next comments are all around, am I destroying the community? So I'm not trying to destroy the community. I don't have a problem with baked beans and the people who run baked beans, or the people who invest in baked beans or follow baked beans, or whatever you do. You guys are really into
baked beans for whatever reason, and I think that's great. Do what you want. What can I say about that? And the criticism here is that, hey, like, I'm glad you're not bigger and that everyone doesn't know about this, because if everyone doesn't follow 6.1, the contract balance is going to drain and it's not going to be as um, as sustainable, and it's going to last not very long. It's going to collapse. Well, I hope that what I've shown you with the numbers and the modeling shows that that's not really true. Like, if everyone follows 6.1 or 29-1, yeah, it's a little bit more sustainable. It lasts a bit longer, but the overall calculation, it doesn't change when the peak is. It doesn't really change the calculations for how much people are going to get back. It's more or less the same. I think this is a red herring, and it's just repeating something that you've been told, that if you do 6.1, if everyone does 6.1, it's going to last forever. In my opinion, that is not borne out in the numbers. That's not demonstrated in the numbers. If I went in and typed 6.1 into there versus 1.1, and I got like a massive change in the curve and it's going to last so much longer, it's just not the case. Like, you just have to remember, at its core, it's Ponzi based. So what it pays out is what is on the contract, and the whole algorithm essentially tries to maintain that contract balance and not let it hit zero quickly. And it does that by lowering your returns when there's a lot of returns pending. So if there's a lot of rebaking going on, that market X variable shoots up through the roof, and the returns get lower. And that's how it makes sure it doesn't run out of contract balance. There's no magic in there to like get extra money out of it, and you can't just keep compounding and imagining that the money's going to come from somewhere. It doesn't come from somewhere. Everything comes from the contract. So, this whole 6.1 thing, in my view, in what the numbers show, it doesn't really make a big difference. It's a lot of people who believe in that because that's what they say about the contract. But play around in the spreadsheet for yourself. If you don't believe me, you're free to follow this. All right. So these next few comments are all around, well, you might get more in the short term, but your logic is flawed because you forgot about compounding. So I didn't forget about compounding, right? Compounding, again, go back to the video that you just watched. Compounding is in there. Beans compound. Your beans compound at a flat 8% a day. That is in the code. When you rebake, you get exactly 8% more beans than you did yesterday. How much those beans are worth is dependent on what everyone else is doing, how much other people are rebaking. It's dependent on the contract balance, the value of market eggs, which is derived from what everyone else is doing on the contract. So when you compound for the 10th time in this video, you compound your beans, you get more beans, your beans are worth less. So it's not straight compounding. The algorithm controls for all the compounding, and the more compounding there is, the less the compounding actually results in an increase in payouts. You're essentially compounding to keep up with inflation most of the time. Always variable, always dependent on the time and all of the specific details on the contract. But to say that you're going to lose out because you're not compounding is to fundamentally misunderstand what the contract is doing. You're not compounding in the same way as you're compounding interest when you have money in the bank. You're compounding a virtual asset, let's call it beans, which is basically a variable that's applied to your contract, your wallet address, and that variable can change in value. It can go up, it can go down, and in the long term, it goes down. So compounding for a time it will be worth less doesn't make any sense. All right. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about this comment, because I think there's a little bit of a misconception and potential misunderstanding of something I said in a previous video, and I just want to clarify that here. So this person is saying, according to your analysis, the reward one can earn each day is completely independent of how often a person bakes and withdraws, simply because one person's rebake withdrawal frequency is not an input into the calculation. In other words, one's personal rebake withdrawal frequency has no impact on the daily rewards one can earn. So let's clarify, and I hope that this video has clarified that absolutely, if your own rebake habits do definitely have an impact on how much you can withdraw, and the number of, because it impacts the number of beans you have. That is in your control. You can rebake and increase the number of beans. What I was calling out that doesn't happen is just to counter a misconception, which was that when you eat a lot, your returns go down. It's not the fact that you eat more often that your returns go down, because when you eat, your personal rates doesn't change. All that happens when you eat is the same thing that happens when you basically don't do anything at all in baked beans, when you don't touch it, when you don't rebake. Nothing happens to the number of your eggs that you hold, and so you're not keeping up with the background inflation rate. So when you eat, you're not increasing or lowering your returns. You're just you're lowering your returns when you don't rebake. So that's the clarification I wanted to make, because it can be a bit confusing. So if you don't rebake, you absolutely do impact your rewards. And at sometimes it makes sense to rebake more often, and other times it makes sense to rebake less often if you want to maximize your rewards, as I've described in this video. So another kind of comment that I get a lot is, hey, there's plenty of contract balance, so everything is fine. Well, okay, so that's fine. Yes, more contract balance is better. More contract balance equals higher returns, and the longer the contract balance is up, the better. But that's not the only factor in these calculations, and I urge you to look at that spreadsheet if you are confused. Look at my other videos if you want more information. But the contract balance being high doesn't not necessarily mean it's going to stay high. If you look at that, the historical performance of BNB Miner and eggs, for example, you can see that tends to fall pretty quickly once the peak is reached. And for mathematical reasons, basically the contract still has to pay back a lot of returns from people, and those returns are high because the contract balance is high. And once those returns are paid out, the contract balance is low, and then the returns drop. And it's just how the maths works out. So just because they're high at the moment doesn't mean they're going to be high for a long time. I don't know how long they're going to be high for. We'll see. It's going to depend how many people invest. If this thing goes mainstream and people invest billions of dollars into it, which is unlikely but could happen, then of course it's going to keep going for much longer. But this is not a consequence of anything to do with compounding, anything to do with the functioning of the algorithm. This is all to do with the same Ponzi-based economics, being that the more new investors go in, the longer it lasts. It's that simple. All right. The next one is another comment that I get a lot, which is that devs are going to make it sustainable and save the day, essentially, if I was to summarize that. So there's the BCT token. There's talk about merchandise and selling merchandise to add to the contract balance and keep it sustainable. So look, I've said in the past this, I wish them the best of luck, and I give them the benefit of any doubt on their intentions to keep this thing going, and their will to keep this thing going. I applaud every effort to make baked beans sustainable, but I don't make my investment decisions and my analysis based on hope of what might happen in the future. I do it based on what the numbers actually show. So if they can do that with BCT token and merchandising, that would be great. But the reason I'm skeptical is that if you look at the size of that contract balance deficit, in BNB, the amount of BNB that has to be covered in order to keep this thing returning at high rates, which is really needed to keep people investing, I just don't see a way for selling some merchandise and basically scraping some value out of another protocol is going to cover that such a large amount in terms of millions of actual dollars in a weekly period as it's kind of growing towards it. It's just if you can make millions of dollars in a week off another protocol, that's probably a better protocol. Like, to be honest, if you can keep that one sustainable and keep that one paying out millions a week, it's probably better just to invest in that one than to throw the balance into this one. So it's to me, it seems like a shaky proposition. All the best to the devs, not doubting their intentions or anything along those lines. I've seen other contracts try to do this kind of thing, and I've never seen anyone succeed. The economics of it just don't make sense to me, but all the best to them on that one. All right, and so this one I wanted to just talk about because it's an interesting question. So what happens if you rebake for 8 straight weeks and then you eat kind of 1 in 7, and then you basically you come up with kind of weird strategies like this? And I responded to this one directly, and I looked at the spreadsheet that this person had put, and it seemed to be based on these kind of assumptions around compound interest that just don't really make sense when you look at the way that the contract works. So right off the bat, I wouldn't say that that's effective, just because this is not a compound interest based payout. So yeah, something like rebaking a lot might work at certain times. In my intuition tells me, based on what I've seen in the contract, that works much better at times when the contract balance is flat than it works when the contract balance is growing. And I personally, I wouldn't be rebaking a lot at a time when the contract balance is growing. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem optimal to me based on the figures I've seen. And this one is interesting too. Should you rebake more frequently? So if you want to rebake, if you think that rebaking is the way to go, does it make more sense to rebake like 5 times a day, 10 times a day? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think the answer is the more that you rebake, just based on compound interest, the way it works, the more compounding times there are in the same kind of interval. If you compound 20 times a day, you're going to eventually in the long term have more beans than if you compound once a day. That's the way the compound interest works. So if you are compounding, it makes sense to do it multiple times a day. The only thing that you need to factor in is obviously fees. So every time you rebake, you have to pay a fee. So if you've got large amounts of BNB and you want to kind of maximize your rebakes and compound, it does make sense to do it several times a day as opposed to just once a day, because you're essentially compounding your beans slightly, and then the next time you compounded them slightly more, and you end up with more beans than if you had just done it once a day. Next one, does it make sense to let your rewards pile up? So that's not doing anything. It's just kind of you don't touch baked beans, and you let your rewards pile up, and then all in one go you withdraw. So no, it doesn't make sense at all to do this. And the reason is because when you're not rebaking, it's the same as eating. So you might as well be eating. Your beans are going to devalue at the exact same rate as if you were eating every day. So it's not a good idea to do that. Yeah, and it's based on that same misconception that when you eat, that's when you get penalized. So you don't get penalized, just to make it clear. You don't get penalized under the contract for eating. You get penalized for not rebaking. So I hope that's clear. Okay, and look, I just wanted to respond to this one generally because a few people have said, hey, I posted something and it got deleted. You guys, you're deleting, you're promoting FUD, you're deleting people's comments. I don't delete anyone who posts something in earnest. The only thing I do is I run a script that deletes spam comments. And that script just checks for people who are impersonating me, who are using my logo and my name and promoting other apps and things like that. If you've got a YouTube channel, you'll know that those things just like worm their way in and post 1,000 comments. So I've got a script that deletes those. When I run that script, I check to make sure I'm not deleting any legitimate comments, and I don't delete any comments. If someone posts something really offensive, like I might delete it, but I'm not going to, delete things that
that are just people earnestly disagreeing with me, and I have left up some pretty offensive comments anyway, so it's not something I plan to do. What I will say is that YouTube sometimes deletes long comments. It just doesn't post them, and I've had that trying to post long responses on other channels, that my comment has just disappeared, and I don't know what's happened. So look, if it's happened to you, I'm sorry. I didn't do it. Wasn't me. If you have some actual comment or criticism, then, you know, share it with me. I'm happy to, as I always say, I'm happy to correct where I'm wrong and learn off you guys. Like if you guys are right, I want to learn off you guys, and I want to tell people that you guys are right. Like I'm not here to like stick to my guns on a stupid idea. This is yeah. Anyway, that's not me. So you know, he said I earn way more than your theoretical strategy. All right, show me the numbers. Take a look. Let me know. Yeah. Look, I'll post this all together because this one has it all. So one guy posts several comments, and they cover all the bases really. So I'm ruining the longevity of the project while making YouTube money off it. Well, listen, I'm not even monetized. I don't know what YouTube money you think I'm getting. They're calling me greedy. I know you can't see that because it's cut off by the banner, but they're saying, you know, you're greedy. Greedy is what hurts crypto in general because I'm selfish and I try to make everything gratify me instantly. Guys, I don't know where this anger comes from and this kind of attitude that I get sometimes. Like, I'm not here to destroy a community. I'm here to just share information, right? So if you believe that the best way to invest and the best way to approach crypto is by not sharing information and by not talking about how things actually work and just like being quiet and telling everyone to do follow 6-1 or some other strategy and not like explaining how things work and allowing people to make informed decisions. Look, I don't know what to tell you. This is just, you know, this is completely baffling to me, that people would have this attitude that they don't want people talking about sharing information. And he alludes to articles by Charles Hoskinson, and he talks about other communities built around legitimate contracts or legitimate technologies like I assume Cardano, and he mentions Vitalik somewhere in this tirade here. This is completely different. I understand building communities around technology that has value, that builds something that is sustainable long term, that builds a platform that people can deploy to, and you know, you can generate long term value off. But for all of these Ponzi based schemes, which I have nothing against, I have nothing against Ponzi based schemes. In this channel I talk about them, and I talk about why when and why they are sometimes good investments and why they're sometimes bad investments, and try to give you the information as I see it. But that's completely different to something that has long-term value and that you can build around, and it's going to last for years, and it's going to keep growing, and it's going to build into something even bigger. And so these comments kind of tick all the boxes. So I'm making money off YouTube by slamming this contract, which is not true. I'm actually making less money by talking about these things, and I think you need to keep this in mind when you listen to people who are telling you to rebake every day and making referral rewards off your rebate. He's also saying that I don't understand compound interest. Absolutely, I understand compound interest, but that's not what baked beans is. So, look at the contract. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Understand these formulas and tell me if you think I'm wrong. So I'm trying to ruin a project. I've spoken about that. And here I am trying to be the greedy one who's just eating and not compounding and not trying to build something for the future. So look, the numbers in my view don't lie. If you think this is going to survive years into the future, we'll see. I think it's going to be dependent on the amount of new investments that come in, much more than any strategy that people follow, whether it's 6-1 or whatever it is. And if you don't agree, look at the numbers, tell me how I'm wrong.
absolutely happy to be wrong. I'm just sharing with you what I have seen by really spending a lot of time looking at these numbers and how these things work. All right, and the final one is based on all the information you provided. I can only assume you've removed your funds from the project and no longer baking beans. And I only share this one because, well, firstly, you can't remove funds from baked beans, but secondly, I there's this kind of response that is, well, if I'm not just mindlessly shilling for something, then it assumes I'm against it. That assumes that I want nothing to do with it and I hate it just because I'm trying to share information about it. Guys, I don't hate baked beans. I've got really nothing against baked beans, and I wish it all the best. And I wish the devs and the owner all the best. And I wish all the people who are involved, all the investors, I wish they all would make money, and I wish everyone would live happily ever after. I've got nothing at all against baked beans. All I'm doing here, which should be obvious to anyone who is reasonable, is trying to share information with you guys. I've spent a lot of time looking at the contract. I've learned a lot about the contract. There's not much information out around baked beans that isn't just straight shilling or, really kind of misleading or very high level. There's a lot of confusing terminology in there. So I know, like me, when I was trying to find out about this, it was really difficult to get information. So I'm just sharing it with you guys. I'm not shilling, because I'm not telling you to that if you do 6-1, you're going to live happily ever after. Doesn't mean I don't think it's a good contract. Doesn't mean I don't think it's a good project to invest in. I've invested in it myself. I'm spending the time to research, to understand how it works, and to look at ways to help you guys get better returns. So I hope all that makes sense. And I don't want to go on and on about this. It's already a long video, and I'm hoping you guys got a lot of good information out of it. Have a look at the spreadsheet if you have time. If you want to go and leave a comment saying that I don't know what I'm talking about and I don't understand compound interest, please feel free to do so. I won't get offended, I promise. It's pretty hilarious at this point, but you do you. So with all that being said, thanks for watching. If you got something out of this, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more content. And I'll see you in the next video.